right. Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, to be able to work and try to work with all of you and the whole community to make homelessness in this community rare, very, very short-lived. Those are two things that we work to do. We often say we are going to end homelessness, and we can give a very rousing effort as to how we would do that. And then when we leave, we say to ourselves, do you think we could really end homelessness? And while it's possible, the fact of the matter is, I really believe that we can make it so that our homeless neighbors are not sleeping on the street and sleeping in cars. We're never going to be in a position with our economic system that people aren't going to fall through the cracks and lose their housing. But we can make it so that people aren't in harm's way every night. And so that's really what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. But before I get more into that, I just wanted to take a minute to thank you. When I was 19 or 20 years old, I was raised in the San Carlos area of San Diego. And I was a bit odd in that I was a 19 and 20-year-old who was involved in my community. And I was given the opportunity to serve on the San Carlos Area Council when I was 19 or 20. And that was 1983. And I went back to my home area. And the amazing thing was that I was able to literally see the high rise by the golf course that was never built. I was able to see the extension from the highway that was supposed to come into town that was never built. And I was able to climb a mountain in the largest city park in the state because of that area council. Because they fought against those things and stopped those things. And they fought for those things that made the community great. And I just wanted to thank you, because the hard work that you put in on this council, somebody is going to come in, and 30 years later they're going to come in and see what you stopped, and they're going to see what you built. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for that. I'll just give a brief, many of you are familiar with Bridge2Home, but I want to kind of give you a brief a synopsis of what we do. As you know, right now we're in winter shelter season, so we have funding from the Los Angeles Area Housing Services Authority, with funding that generated through HUD, to provide winter shelter from 6 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning at the facility on Drayton Street between December 1st and March 31st. We, through fundraising, through our Soups for the Soul event, we're able to have 2 weeks before that. So well before Thanksgiving, we open up the shelter. And one of the goals is and has been that we stop being a winter shelter and that we have the opportunity to provide year-round services. And I'll get more into that with you. But if you haven't been out, it's the far side of Drayton Street on by where Waste Management is. We do the winter shelter. It's a key service, but we also have two offices. We had one office, now we have a second office in the Newhall Shopping Center over by the Terrace Apartments and by the Village Apartments, right next door to the health center. And in those areas, we now have eight staff members who are providing resource coaching, counseling, case management, linkages to services, and those services are healthcare, mental health, drug and alcohol, and job development services. We have partners in the community, and we're working with our clients around their work with all of those people so that they're making the progress to go from homelessness to housing. When funding is available, we also have motel vouchers for families, motel vouchers for people who are in serious crisis during the periods of time when we don't have shelter available or if we're full. Last night we were full. The night before we were full. The night before that we had one bed. The night before that we were full. So the shelter has been full at its 60-bed capacity since we opened, about 2 weeks after we opened. So far, since July, we've had 300 what we call service units. A service unit is an individual or a family. So we've had 300 individuals or families who have come through either the shelter or the service program. And Of those, like I said, 60 people a night are staying at the winter shelter. So, the effort to create a year-round shelter has been amazing. And I've had the opportunity to work in homeless services, to work as a leader in some YMCAs. I was the executive director for a short time for the Hollywood YMCA. And what's happened in this community to rally around building this shelter is like something that folks have never seen. You might have noticed in the Venice community when they talked about building a shelter, that was not popular. In Koreatown, that was not popular. And yet, there are communities like this one. I, as the director of Homemade Los Angeles, helped to bring the building industry to construct a 61-bed recuperative care center in the Pico Union neighborhood of Los Angeles with the National Health Foundation. And 61 beds in a 13,000 square foot old 1911 building. And those were for people coming out of the hospital who are homeless. Literally, not only was the program welcomed, but the neighbors sewed the curtains. They came and painted the building. And so the thing is, communities can rally. So about, I think probably a month ago, we received the deed so that Bridge2Home now owns the 2 acres of land that the shelter currently rests on. We're operating a shelter that serves 60 people without running water and without sewer. So we have a tank of water and we have porta potties from Andy Gump. And 60 people live there, and they live in cots in temporary buildings. We are thrilled to have that land that we can build on. And we are now planning to do that. So one of the first steps was to raise the necessary money to put in the sewer and to put in the water. So Al, indeed the money did arrive. We have a private donation, we have 2 private donations, and we have a good source of funding that's now in the bank. So on Friday I'm going to get the RFP bids from bidders to do the surveying of the land so that we can spend the money and bring in the sewer and bring in the water. We also have architects who have been working really, really hard to figure out the best possible solution that would be what the community needs, what homeless people need, but looking not so much at what do we want and what might be a glorious experience, but what is it we need and how can we do it at the most reasonable price that we possibly can. Originally, there were thoughts that the project might cost $6 million to build. At this point, we're looking at building something more like $3.6 million with some money for reserves. Again, we're working with Homemade as well. We hopefully will be working with Homemade. Thanks to people's efforts around the Tesoro project, there's now $1.6 million from that developer that has now been targeted to do Santa Clarita homeless service programs for construction. And there's some money that's now been identified at the county level that we've also been targeted for. We're anticipating right now that from the community we'll probably need to raise about $1 to $1.5 million to build what it is that we need to build. And what it is this. Now, this might change somewhat, but this is the Drayton Street facility. And right now, in this space here, there's nothing but temporary buildings. So we have secured a grant for just under $700,000 to build the community's first family shelter. Right now, there is no shelter except people going to churches through the amazing work of Family Promise. They're going to churches and going back and forth to a service center. We have 80 families who have received services. And the capacity of building 20, there's plenty of room for anybody who wants to help families to help families. So what we're looking at doing is, in this space that you see here, we're going to cordon this off in a very safe way, and we're going to build a family shelter right here. And right now we're looking at 20 beds for 20 family members. But there's also space in the future we could put some temporary units that we could help more families if we needed to help more families. So the focus here is very much on families. Over in this area here This is the women's dormitory area. These are the men's dormitory area. And this is where the showers and laundry facilities, anything that involves something that's wet, will be in this space. And actually, we've just done some work to move this over, so we're creating more of a barrier between the women's section and the section for men. So that will be here. Now, our plan right now is that what we're looking to do is we want to secure money to go year-round now. We want to secure it and use whatever we have now and house people. And what we would do is build the family shelter first. We would build this section next. Then we will tear down what exists now and build in this section the permanent service center. So this is where all of the staff will work. We anticipate having a health clinic. We anticipate having mental health services. All of the partners who are currently doing work will have a central place to go, so that every person who wants to go from homelessness to housing will have all of their services available on one campus. And the thought right now is, unlike the urban areas, where it's very urban. It's a very urban environment. A lot of the people who are coming from us are living in very outdoor spaces. So we're looking at creating a camp-like campus, so there's an easy transition for people to come in. But we're looking at having security, we're looking at having plenty of parking, and a big center here where people can get all of their needs met. So that's the goal, and that's what we've developed so far. Now, there's a lot of money that's going to be spent on walls, because we're going to have to move a lot of dirt. There's just, as you know, there's hills and things in that area. So we're looking to work with surveyors and folks to figure out how we can do that best and use the land to meet the need. So that's where we're at right now. That's the news. And the only other news, thank you, Al, I appreciate it, is we can't do most of this work until we have some funding to make sure that we have the staff and all the services that we need to make that happen. Great progress has been made in that regard. I told you that we have money for some of the construction, and we'll be raising money for the rest. But just wanted to clarify what you might have read in the newspaper. Money for homeless services comes from many different sources. It comes from Proposition H. There's now all kinds of money coming from what's called HEAP funding from the state. There's county money. There's HUD money. It's very confusing how it all sort of comes together. And the LA Homeless Services Authority is responsible for juggling all of that money and making it work. So we had entered into a process of doing an application to provide just under $1 million worth of funding on an annual basis for the service center. And we got a notice of delay that we weren't going to hear in October, November. We were going to hear in January. And then, in surprise, in December, we got a letter saying that the whole grant process had simply been canceled, that the money that had been targeted was no longer available. It turns out that was not Proposition H money. It was some other county money that had to be distributed otherwise. So the good news was that they introduced another process almost identical to what we do. It's not identical enough that we don't have to do a lot of work on an application to make it all work, but that conference is at the end of the month, and we will apply. What we know is that our grant was very, very strong. We strongly believe, and we've been led to believe, that it's likely we would have received funding. So we're participating in that process, and we immediately said, what are we going to do? Because in our hearts and in the community's hearts, the concept that we would close again on March 31st and that 60 people who were living in safety would no longer be living in safety, which we've done for over 20 years, it's better than nothing, that we don't want to do that. So we went to the community and said we wanted to raise funds, and Supervisor Barger's office, it will cost us $200,000 to remain open from March 31st until July 31st, which is when we'll know about the funding. So we've secured that money from Supervisor Barger's office. Huge thanks to her and her staff and the county staff for determining that this was a priority and having enough belief in what it is that we're trying to do in Santa Clarita that we would be able to secure the funding that we need. If for some reason we don't, we would end our intake process so that the people who are in the shelter would have services for a 6-week period to find places to go rather than just being put out on the street. So we've got a plan B, but we're feeling very good that we're going to be able to be successful with plan A, which is that we are open until July 31st and we secure the funding then to stay open, not just from 5 until 8, but 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Any questions?
So my name is John Seamus, a longtime resident of this wonderful valley. Question mark. What is the homeless I have a couple of questions. What is the homeless population in this area? Second, where do you refer these people to when the shelter fills up? And third, there was a case where a young lady committed suicide because she was turned down for shelter, and she stepped in front of a train. And how do you prevent people from committing suicide once they get turned down?
Well, I just want to be clear. I've only been here for 3 months, so I don't know a lot of details on many things, but I was aware of the lady who had stepped in front of a train. I want to be clear, that didn't occur during shelter season. That occurred during the time when the shelter was completely closed. Now, we had been open to have people come take showers and have dinner, but there's no funding to keep the shelter open, which is what we're trying to solve. As it comes to helping people with mental health issues, we work very, very hard to work with the local mental health department. There's a MET team, so when somebody is experiencing suicide ideation and we go through a process of talking to them about it, we call the MET team to come out and work with them. I've personally been involved with that twice at our shelter. So there are protocols, but I can tell you that the problem of mental health and the problem of hoping and trying to save every single person, there's no excuse for not helping every single person with the knowledge that we can't. We can't help every single person, although we will try and do everything humanly possible that we can. As it relates to the homeless population here, the homeless count is a one-day count. It was high one year, not high the other. I'm learning about it right now. I'm learning how that works. What I can tell you is that last year there were nearly 500 unduplicated people who came through the doors of Bridge to Home. That I can tell you is a number.
But on any given night, what is the homeless?
Yeah, I would get that 2 years ago the count was 300. My guess is that if they do the count in a more similar way to the way it was done in the past, it would be the same. But that's just my guess. A new count is coming up on January 22nd, and I'm going to watch and observe how it works and what that is. Maybe some...
So where are these people referred to then? Because obviously 60 beds is not sufficient. Where do they have to go?
They remain on the street or wherever in their car.
Is there any referral to another shelter?
Absolutely. So absolutely, if somebody comes into our center,
where's the closest?
If they are willing and able, there are shelters in the valley. LA Family Housing has shelters. There's a number of other shelters. What I've experienced and what our staff has experienced is that 70% of the people who we see are from Santa Clarita and they don't want to leave. And when we try to get them to go into Van Nuys or areas that they feel that are not their home, they're very reluctant to do that. Yeah. So all of that suggests as to why it's so important for us to build this as fast as we can.
Yes, I've been watching this issue, and it was my understanding that there were to be a shelter in the county and in the city. Now, that would kind of make some sense. But for there to only be a shelter in the city of Santa Clarita when we're surrounded by the county that is going to be vastly developed soon, doesn't seem appropriate. There should be, the county should be putting in their own shelter in their areas, because it's just right across the I-5 is the county. And I can't quite understand why that was dropped and why the city would step forward and say, we're going to handle all of the homeless. That doesn't, when the count comes in, it'll be interesting to see what's happening in this area.
That one works.
That one wasn't working?
You just didn't have it close enough.
I was able to hear everything that you said. Thank you for your
Okay.
comments. I
But
appreciate
that's
that.
my concern. I think definitely we need the county to step up to the plate and have their homeless shelter also out here.
You have to hold it close.
Do you interface with the suicide prevention group at College of the Canyons?
I feel that we probably do, but again, I'm fairly new, so I would need to talk to our staff and make sure that I can confirm that that is
Would
something
you
that
please?
we do. I absolutely will, yes,
Thank
and I'll
you.
get back to you with that. We're involved in as partners in many projects. We've just received a grant to work with the Domestic Violence Center, doing the housing and navigation system for homeless people who are in the domestic violence shelter. So we're working as partners in many areas, and I'm sure that we're involved with the suicide partnership as well, but I need to confirm that.
Let's give it a Ms. Foley a big hand.